Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this morning. This morning, we're again drafting for compliance, and we'll share with you some best practices for standards in support of the Toy Safety Directive and the General Product Safety Regulation. My name is Els, and I'll be moderating the webinar in the background. You'll all be muted during the presentations, but you can use the Q&A panel in the Zoom webinar here to submit your questions. Should you be on one of our social media channels, please feel free to talk about the subject with the hashtag training for standards. The webinar has been recorded, so we will share with you the presentations and the recording later today. So you can share it and look back at it if you want to. So I think I can right away give the floor to my colleague Frédéric, who will present you the agenda of today's webinar. Thank you, Frédéric.
Thank you, Els. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning webinar dedicated to the Toy Safety Directive and the General Product Safety Regulation. So the welcome has been done. The opening remarks will be done by Annalisa Rover from the European Commission. Then CCMC will take a few minutes to make some key reminders about the drafting processes and the development processes, as well as some rules related to the regulations. Then EY will give you some important reminders about the HAS process and on the overview of sectorial updates. And finally, the key element of the webinar this morning, it will be Alexander Rankin, who will give a presentation dedicated to the best practices and recurrent issues in the sectors. And the webinar will end with a Q&A session following the presentation from Alexander. So the first speaker today is Annalisa from the European Commission, and I leave the floor to Annalisa. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning to all the participants to the webinar. My name is Annalisa La Rovere, and I work on toy safety at the European Commission. Frederick, could you please move to the next slides? And thank you. I will give you a short background regarding the Toy Safety Directive. As you know, the Toy Safety Directive 2009/48 was adopted in 2009, and it was fully applicable. This means with all the chemical requirements in all the EU, the 27 countries at the time, there were still 28, since July 2013. The most important provisions relate to the obligations for economic operators and the safety requirements and the procedure to prove conformity of toys, the warnings, the EC declaration of conformity, the CE marking, among others. One of the most important provisions is Article 12 of the Toy Safety Directive on the free movement of toys in the EU. According to this article, member states shall not impede the making available on the market in their territory of toys which comply with the directive. Could you please flip to the next slide? So what is a toy according to the Toy Safety Directive? In particular, Article 2, Paragraph 1. Toys are products designed or intended, whether or not exclusively, for use in play by children under 14 years of age. This article is very important because it defines the scope of the Toy Safety Directive. So only those products that fulfill these conditions are considered, are covered as covered by the scope of the Toy Safety Directive. Next slide, please. So a toy has to be safe according to the Toy Safety Directive. There are essential safety requirements, which I mentioned earlier, which could be distinguished between the general safety requirements in Article 10, Paragraph 2 of the Toy Safety Directive, and the particular safety requirements, which are in Annex 2. So according to the general safety requirements, toys must not jeopardize the health and safety of the child playing, nor of others, when used as intended or in a foreseeable way bearing in mind the behavior of children. Next slide, please. In this slide, you can see the particular safety requirements, which are in Annex 2 of the Toy Safety Directive. This annex is divided into 6 parts, covering all the different requirements: physical and mechanical properties, flammability, chemical properties, electrical properties, hygiene, and radioactivity. As you know, safety requirements are not the same as standards because they are provided in legislation and therefore they are mandatory. Standards, as you know, are not mandatory in the EU. However, they play a very important role in terms of toy safety. We will see this in the next slide. But the main purpose of standards is to translate the legal requirements of the Toy Safety Directive into practical and widely accepted criteria and specifications to find out whether a toy fulfills the safety requirement. Next slide, please. This is a very important provision in the Toy Safety Directive as concerns standards, the so-called presumption of conformity, which says that toys which are in conformity with harmonized standards or parts thereof, the references of which have been published in the official journal of the European Union, shall be presumed to be in conformity with the requirements covered by those standards or parts thereof, set out in Article 10 and Annex 2, which I have mentioned in the previous slides. Therefore, if we can proceed to the next slide, please. In short, if a standard is delivered by the European Standardization Organization and has been referenced by the Commission in the EU, and if the toy conforms to all those specifications in referenced harmonized standards that apply to that particular toy, then the toy is presumed to conform to all the applicable requirements of the Toy Safety Directive, and therefore it can be placed on the market in the EU. Next slide, please. I will go very quickly on these 2 slides just to highlight that there are 2 ways of proving conformity. So there is the conformity assessment by the manufacturer himself, the so-called self-certification, where it is the manufacturer that applies the referenced harmonized standards and certifies the conformity himself. Or, as we can see in the next slide, the conformity assessment is done by a third party, the so-called notified body. This is the EC type examination. So it is the third party that carries out the conformity assessment and certifies the conformity of the toy by issuing an EC type examination certificate. Next slide, please. Why are harmonized standards important? They're important because manufacturers and other economic operators or conformity assessment bodies, which I have just mentioned, can use harmonized standards to demonstrate that toys comply with relevant EU legislation. Therefore, standards support also the effective implementation of the legislation and the functioning of the internal market. They provide industry with clear guidance and legal certainty, and they allow manufacturers, in particular small and medium enterprise, also to align their products, their toys in this case, to regulatory requirements, to enhance compliance and to maintain competitiveness in the internal market. In the next slide, you can see all the current toy safety standards. They are all in the EN 71 series concerning toy standards. And then in the next slide, you will see that there is a specific standard for electric toys. It's EN 62115. All these harmonized standards have been referenced in the last Commission implementing decision of 2 years ago. You can see it displayed here. It was adopted in 2023, and it was recently amendment in September 2025. Next slide, please. As you know, in 2022, a new standardization request was adopted, requesting the European Standardization Organization to revise the current standards and to develop new standards. So this standardization request is currently under execution, and date of validity is in October next year. You can see in the next slide the new standards to be delivered according to the standardization request. These standards have already been delivered, and we are now working on referencing them in the official journal. And in the next slide, you can see the standards to be revised according to the current standardization request. Some of them have already been delivered, some will be delivered. In the last slide, 2 slides, we make reference to our future standardization request. So after the adoption of the new toy safety regulation, which is forthcoming, a new mandate will be given to the European Standardization Organization to support the new requirements of the new toy safety regulation, which will further improve children's protection, in particular from harmful chemicals. And in the last slide, you can find a few links with all information regarding the EU Toy Safety homepage, regarding the text of the Toy Safety Directive and all the amendments, other legislation relevant for toys, as well as an update on the revision of the current toy safety directives. And there is also a link on the page on harmonized standards for toys. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you a lot, Annalisa. Before I continue with my part and then Astrid's part, I forgot to mention at the beginning that there's Marie as well, the desk officer for GPSR, that is with us, and she will give an update just before my part. So I will go quick on this part. Most of you know already the processes for developing harmonized standards, but I will just do some quick reminders. So the innovative process, you probably know it already. It's a process that is in place for almost 2 years already. It's targeting standards developed at a European level, so homegrown standard. And the 2 main pillars of the process are the mature draft concept. So it means a draft that is almost ready to be circulated for inquiry, and the CCMC quality check. These 2 elements are here to shift the focus and the efforts at the beginning of the development, so that by the end of the development, we get a compliant harmonized standard. And the CCMC quality check, the goal is to help technical bodies, and hopefully identify elements in the draft that could potentially lead to a lack of compliant assessment. And to perform this quality check, we use the common checklist that is the same template that is used by the HAS consultant. So the process in a nutshell, so the QC1 is the first quality check on the mature draft. A1 is the first assessment on the mature draft before the inquiry. And then there's a possibility to have another assessment during the inquiry. And then for the second part of the development and the formal vote part, same, you have another quality check, the pre-formal vote assessment, and then if it's not compliant, you have the possibility to have a last confirmatory assessment before the project goes into the formal vote part. Here it's quickly for your information. I will not go through this slide, but in a nutshell, if you want to request a quality check, you have to contact hsc@CEN for us to perform the quality check and then to request the assessment. So as we saw in the timeline for the process, you have the possibility to have 4 assessments per work item, the last confirmatory assessment being optional, and it's the last one. And we hope that with the new process, the last confirmatory assessment will become exceptional. Another important element, it's not possible to request an assessment on a standard that has been made available. If the standard is published, there's no assessment possible anymore. For process developed in parallel, I will go quick. The idea is the same, is really to shift the effort and the focus at the beginning to help avoid the project being blocked at the end. And here, for the project developed in parallel, what is key is a strong communication and an early consensus building between the European TC and the international TC. And same thing here, the goal of the process is to improve timely delivery of compliant harmonized standard, avoid the project being blocked before the publication, and as well, very important for parallel projects, minimize the interference with international project time frame. This is the timeline of the development. So when there's a CD circulated at international level, then we can perform a quality check and request a CD assessment. But if there's no CD at international level, this step is skipped, and then it's the process as usual with the parallel CDV and the parallel FDIS. Key points for the development in parallel. So again, start the process early. And the new process is only available if there's a CD at international level. And what is key, again, is the communication between the European TC and the international TC, so that the European annexes, Annex ZA, are ready when the CD draft is ready, and are ready as soon as possible, so that we can perform a quality check and or request an assessment as early as possible, because without the European annexes, we will not be able to request a HAS assessment. The common checklist is not mandatory for projects developed in parallel, but it's highly recommended to use it, because then you will see on what criteria your standards will be assessed by the HAS consultant. Key drafting reminders, very quickly. So performing the self-assessment using the quality check will help you again see on what criteria your standards will be assessed. For the requirements, you shall draft clear and verifiable provisions. When a requirement listed in the Annex Z is vague or leaves room for interpretation, you have high chances of getting a lack of compliant assessment. And then for the normative references, they shall be dated, active, and published when used in a clause supporting the presumption of conformity. And as well, we recommend to refer to a specific clause within the normative reference. This will avoid issues related to chains of normative references. So being specific when you use a normative reference will be very helpful. And finally, please use the CCMC guidance documents that we have. This will help you understand what needs to be done, and all the guidance documents we have will address probably a lot of your questions. Here, I put some links, useful links to webinars, drafting rules, webinar about the processes, about the common checklist, and I invite you to have a look to those very useful webinars and content. That's it for my part. Thank you. Now I leave the floor to Astrid and Marie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. It's very nice to see you all today in the webinar. So thank you very much for taking the time to join. My name is indeed Marie Gérardi, and I work in DG Justice in the unit responsible for the General Product Safety Regulation, so the GPSR. We already organized a webinar with the CCMC 1.5 years ago on the GPSR and on the citing of standards in the OJEU for the GPSR. So some of the points of today you're already familiar with. But as many of you know, the situation under the GPSR is a little peculiar. And today's Astrid presentation is also meant as supporting you in navigating this with confidence. So under the GPSR, we indeed cover a very wide scope of products. So we have an exceptionally wide range of products to be covered. So it means that the path to having standards cited in the OJEU is somewhat different from other types of legislation under the EU, which are concerned with one specific type of product. So in particular for GPSR product, we have an extra additional step before a standard can be cited in the OJEU. And this step is that the Commission must adopt a decision on the safety requirements that standards must meet. So the GPSR itself only contains a so-called general safety requirements that consumer products have to be safe. And then next to that, we have additional decisions which set out the specific safety requirements which are applicable to given categories of products. So these requirements in this extra decision are crucial for your work because a standard can only be cited in the OJEU if it fulfills the safety requirements laid down in that extra decision, so to speak, which is itself based on the GPSR. So that's why understanding this process is so important for all the TC involved. And before I give the floor to Astrid for a detailed presentation, I'm very pleased to share that we're currently preparing the standardization request on childcare articles based on the GPSR, and that our internal draft is ready, and that we will soon be able to publish it with the ESOs, and of course all the relevant TCs will be consulted. So thank you very much, and I give back the floor to Astrid.
Yes, thank you very much, Marie, and good morning, everyone. My name is Astrid Tomme, and I am the sectoral project manager for the consumer topics, including general product safety legislation. So today I've prepared a presentation in cooperation with Marie to give some clarity on the Annex A, because I know it has been quite a ride the last year. So I think it's very important to highlight some clarity on the Annex A. I'm just gonna try. Is it working? Yes. So first, some acronyms for glossary with BT, but I think most of you know these acronyms already. So let's go. Then the content. The presentation will consist of two parts. First, I will give quickly just an overview of the European mandates under GPSR, because there are three specific cases. And then the second part consists of the practical part, where I'll give for each case an example of how the Annex ZA should look like. So here is an overview. So in general, there are three specific cases. The first case consists of the red mandates. These mandates are invalid mandates, so it's not possible to publish, offer, and cite these European standards for these old mandates in the OJ, because they do not contain a decision with safety requirements until the new standardization request for children's products is adopted. So for these red mandates, we have a specific transitional solution to develop the draft standards. Then the second case are the purple mandates. Those mandates are mandates that have specific conditions, so it's possible to publish, offer, and cite these European standards, but you need to fulfill the right safety requirements decision, and of course, you also need to give a justification of urgency that is need to be sent to the European Commission before the status of offering. And then the last case are the green mandates. Those are the valid ones. And for these ones, it's possible to publish, offer, and cite these standards, and you don't need to have a justification of urgency for these ones. So then let's go to the practical part for the red mandates. So for these ones, I've prepared some overview. So it's very simple how it's stated here. You don't refer to the old mandate in the Annex A, and you only refer to the new decision on the safety requirements for children products. So this is the Commission decision from 2023, 1338. And for these red mandates, the HAS assessment can continue, but it's a bit specific. The HAS assessment can continue if the draft standards until formal vote. So then it's developed with the Annex A, and the HAS assessments can continue. So those standards will be assessed by HAS consultants. But if the draft standards are to be submitted to formal vote, so if it's close to formal vote, then we have this temporary solution to temporarily remove the link to legislations until the new standardization request is adopted. So what does this mean? Removal of the link. First, you need to have a TC decision to ask the removal of the link. Then we will have the BT decision on the removal. And then a last step, CCMC will remove the link in the forward and the annex at A before formal vote. So at this stage, there will be no assessments anymore at the formal vote stage. And once the new standardization request is adopted, the link to GPSR will be achieved via amendments. And we can do this via a fast track procedure. So this means at the annex at A, and of course, then has assessment and BT approval. But I just want to highlight that this is a transitional solution. So once the new standardization request is adopted, the slide will be not valid anymore, but communication will follow, of course. So for these red mandates, I have drafted an example of the Annex A, including the new decision. The slides will also be shared after the webinar, of course. Then the second case for the purple mandates, for these ones, it's also very simple. It's just refer to the mandate because these mandates are valid mandates. And you can refer to the old decision on safety requirements. So there is no need to refer to the new decision. And I have shared also an example. So what do I mean with the old decision? It's just the decision that exists already. So from 2011 for mandate 506, for example. Then for the green mandates, the last case, it's also a bit similar to the purple ones, just refer to the mandate and also need to refer to the old decision on safety requirements. So there's also no need to refer to the new decision. Again, an example on this. So for example, for mandate 538, there is the old decision on safety requirements from 2015. Okay, so that was it. Thank you. I'll give the floor to Alexander right now.
I think it's still first my part.
Sorry. To Emilia then.
I'm just resting the screen. Okay, good morning, everyone. So my name is Emilia Pauwels, and I'm part of EY HAS support. So today we're just, sorry. Today we're going to be giving a bit of an overview of the HAS project from EY's side and a bit of an update on the sector data and status of the GPSR and toy sectors HAS assessment of the past few years. So brief introduction to our team. My name is Emilia Pauwels, as I mentioned, and I'm here supported by my colleagues Milko and Dan today. Milko and I handle more of the daily communication with the HAS consultants, and Dan is our core team leader who handles more of the daily management of the project, also supported by our project manager Joke, and our two colleagues Julia and Hannah, who handle more of the operations and invoicing processes. And as the HAS consultants who are working with us, we have Alexander Rankin, who will be providing the presentation after my presentation. We also have two more GPSR specific consultants, Giancarlo Bedotti and Miroslav Kristolik, who are also in the meeting today. Giancarlo and Miroslav are specifically consultants for GPSR, and then Alex Rankin also does toys and GPSR assessments, both sectors. And a brief overview of the key stakeholders who are involved in the HAS system. So we have EY and the HAS consultants. On the bottom, we are sort of the intermediate between the European Commission and the European standardization organizations and technical committees. So we handle the communication between the two. And then the ESOs, of course, submit the request, and the Commission is then in charge of making the decision whether to cite or not the standards in the official journal of the EU. In the HAS project overall, we have around 20-something sectors, 23 sectors that are covered in general. So toys and GPSR are only two of those sectors who are covered. Both sectors are relatively small to mid-size compared to some of the other sectors that we cover. But in general, toys and GPSR are between each other or among the same size. So it's not the super busiest sectors in terms of workload, but we do get a good amount of requests in both of these sectors. Then just an overview of the HAS project. So we provide a service to the European Commission, of course, as a contractor. The European Commission is the contracting authority on the project, but the service that we provide is, of course, also to the European standardization organizations. And the overall aim of the project is, of course, to increase the compliance rate and the publication rate of harmonized standards in the OJEU. Main objectives of the project are to identify and address the typical compliance concerns that are leading to non-compliance in draft standards. We also provide regular training and support to the HAS consultants, but also some guidance and support to the European standardization organizations and the European Commission services. We, of course, support the European Commission in their effort to reduce the number of non-cited standards. And lastly, my daily task is also to ensure that all the HAS consultants have all the resources and the information that they need to be able to carry out their assessments. So we ensure that they have all of the documents so that they can really dedicate their time to the assessment itself, and all their resources can be dedicated to their tasks. And a brief overview of the procedures in the HAS assessment. So as Frédéric already briefly went over, you as technical bodies first submit your self-assessment to CCMC, which then CCMC will conduct a check of this self-assessment, and they then forward the assessment request to us at EY, and we will allocate this to the relevant HAS consultants. So we have different HAS consultants for different sectors. In this case, we allocate it to a TOIS or GPSR consultant. Once the consultant receives the documents, they complete the check of compliance. They submit a report based with a dedicated outcome. So they determine whether the document is compliant, non-compliant, or conditionally compliant. And then before we upload it and send it back to the ESOs and to the Commission, we also have a quality review system in place. So our quality reviewers will go over each and every assessment that is completed to determine if the assessment is coherent, if it's clear, if there's anything that needs to be clarified. If there's anything that might be missing, they send it back to the consultant. The consultant addresses the issues and they resubmit it. And then once we have the green light, we submit the final report, the completed report, to CCMC and to the Commission. And then a quick recap of the role of the HAS consultants. So they perform the verification and the assessment of the documents, the draft standards that are submitted. And they work in support of the Commission, but it's important to mention they do not represent the Commission. So they are contracted by EY. Their role is, of course, to convey the Commission's positions to the ESOs or the technical bodies. For example, in meetings that you can request with the HAS consultants, their goal is to convey the official position of the Commission. And of course, mentioning meetings, they are not allowed to modify or revise their reports in the meetings with the technical committees. So we do have this option to request meetings with the HAS consultants, but this should only be to clarify any comments that were already made on the report. It should not be to revise the report, because the HAS consultant should not be contributing to the standards development process, of course. And then a final reminder is the European Commission considers the results of the HAS assessments by the consultants, but they are not bound by the outcome of the assessment. So ultimately, the decision to cite a standard or not is still in the hands of the Commission. And we've already briefly gone over the different stages at which you can request an assessment, but of course we have the first stage committee draft, then a public inquiry, formal vote stage, and exceptionally a last confirmatory assessment. So now we're going to go a bit more into the data and the status of assessments in the HAS system overall, but also specifically for TOIS and GPSR. So here we have an overview of the number of assessment requests that were submitted at each stage. So for GPSR, you can see, well, for both sectors actually, it is most popular to submit requests at ENQ or at FV stage. For TOIS, there's been a few more requests at ENQ stage. We encourage the TCs to request assessments at early stages. to increase the compliance rate at later stages of assessment. So of course, if you submit a request at an earlier stage, there is a higher chance you can submit it again at a later stage, and there's a higher chance of compliance at that later stage. But in the case of a lack of compliance outcome, you must wait until the next stage to submit a new request. In the meantime, in between the two assessment requests, you are allowed and encouraged to request a meeting with the house consultant who completed the first assessment, again, to receive a clarification on any of the comments, but not to modify the report or revise the outcome. One KPI that we try to adhere to is that the entire process of assessment, of completing an assessment, from the moment that we receive the request from CCMC to the moment that we upload the completed reports, is that this entire process is completed within 35 days. So as some of you might remember, there was a bit of a backlog situation at the start of this contract in 2022, because there was a gap between the previous contract and the current contracts where a lot of assessments were not completed. So we had a bit of a backlog situation in 2022 and 2023. In the meantime, the backlog has been cleared and we have been able to, for the most part, stick to this 35-day KPI. Of course, there are some exceptions. There are some situations where it's not entirely possible to complete the entire process in 35 days. But for the most part, our average duration of completing an assessment is 35 days, and the median is 31 days. Just to note, this is for the entire HAS system, because the data for TOIS and GPSR alone was a bit low because there weren't many assessments in the past year. And of course, this fourth quarter for 2025, right now, a lot of assessments are still ongoing. So this figure will still be, the green will still increase to a higher rate. Then here we have a quick overview of the compliance outcomes for both TOIS and GPSR and HAS system overall. As you can see for TOIS, actually the compliance outcome is quite high at 65%, and for GPSR, the lack of compliance is a bit higher at 70% of assessments, but it's quite comparable to the overall HAS sectors. We do generally have a high non-compliance rate, which we are still actively trying to work with both the TCCs and the house consultants to see how we can improve the compliance outcomes of assessments, especially at later stages. And then in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of this in detail because Alexander will, of course, go into more detail with you afterwards. But here we just have an overview of the top 5 critical findings that are leading to lack of compliance in both sectors. I'll maybe just mention the first one. So the first requirement that is not met, leading to non-compliance, is that the Annex Z properly relates to the relevant legal requirements of EU legislation, to the clauses or sub-clauses of the document. But I will leave this to Alexander to go into more detail afterwards. And then we just have an overview here of the assessment outcome, the compliance outcomes per stage of assessment. So you can see that right now at FV stage, we have around 30% of assessments that have a compliance outcome that are good or sufficient quality for a compliance document. I should mention that, of course, the number of assessments included in this analysis is a bit lower. It's 63 assessments for both sectors combined. And it's important to note that for the LCA stage, this is only the data for GPSR assessments because there were no assessments included in analysis for the TOIS sector. So at LCA stage, we also have 70% conditional compliance. A bit of a disclaimer here is that this conditional compliance rate is related to a series of assessments that we received in 2024. And the conditional compliance outcome is only given to documents where the compliance is dependent on some of the normative references included in the document. So this is why for this particular series of, I think it was 6 or 7 standards, the outcome was conditional compliance. And then because it's an ongoing long-term project, the HAS system, we try to improve it every day, and we've taken a lot of steps in the past to make it beneficial for all parties involved. So one of the points that we do try to focus on is to avoid changing the HAS consultant in between different assessment stages. So to make sure that if one consultant completes an assessment at CD stage, for example, that we try to assign the same consultant at the next stage of the assessment. Of course, there are always some exceptions when it might not be possible, but for the most part, this is our way of working. We've also worked to improve the speed of resolution when there are discrepancies in assessments between different stages. We work a lot on improving the coordination between consultants. So if there are, for example, one standard that is assessed for different sectors, we make sure that the consultants can communicate between one another and also communicate with the quality review team, for example, to ensure that there is consistency and coordination between them. This is also part of our increased consistency through guidance and training. We have our quality review team who provides feedback if there are any issues with a particular consultant or any recurring issues across the HAS sectors overall. We try to make sure that they have the right training and support that they need. And we work towards a streamlined process of the meeting request process with the consultants. So you should all be aware that we do have a link to a survey where you can submit a request for a meeting with the consultant if you have any questions about some of the comments that were made on the report or on the assessment. And we work towards increasing the communication and mutual learning with the technical committees in, for example, meetings like this one, which we're organizing for several sectors, not all of the sectors in the project, but a lot of sectors, like this one. And then just before I hand the floor over to Alexander, just a quick reminder on some best practices for meeting requests. We do ask that you submit the request for a meeting at least 4 weeks prior to the meeting date so that we have enough time to process the request and to ensure the availability of the HAS consultant. Please always provide an agenda. It can be bullet points, but some sort of an agenda for the consultant so that they can prepare their intervention. And again, only meetings linked to the previous assessment are allowed in this project, because again, the purpose of the meetings is not for the HAS consultant to contribute to the drafting process, but really to provide clarification about their previous assessments. And we do always encourage online meetings, but physical meetings are possible. They should be first checked, of course, with the HAS consultants. And here we included the link to the meeting request tool where you can request a meeting. And then we have some general criteria underneath, but I think I've already covered this quite well in the past. So I will now hand the floor over to Alex for his presentation. If you have any questions, you can always either reach out in the chat right now or afterwards reach out to us over email. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Amelia. Okay, good. So my name is Alexander Rankin. As mentioned, I'm a HAS consultant. I have been a HAS consultant since April 2018, which is 7 years. And I must say, it's been a pleasure working with colleagues all the way through from the Commission to EY through to the various technical committees. And it's been a real pleasure. I'm very happy to be part of this unique global process for the HAS assessment for possible reference in the official journal. And I have to say that everybody has a very important role to play from the first drafting of standards or for revision of standards all the way to the reference in the official journal. And I have to say, we are super critical of ourselves sometimes, which we should always be self-critical, but also we should sometimes give ourselves a pat on the back because this is such a unique system that operates. Now we have the supporting standards which are referenced in the official journal, but we also have the legislation as well. So the system seems to work very well, but there are always problems, and we will try to deal with those problems as soon as they occur, and we'll deal with those through the method of communication for that. So this is my presentation, and what I'm trying to do today is just highlight certain aspects which have caused problems in the past, and we are concerned with toys, Toy Safety Directive, Toy Safety Regulation. We're concerned also with general product safety regulation, and the general product safety regulation concerns childcare products, which often are very similar to toys, but also the general product safety regulation is a safety net. We remember that it is a safety net, and so we have a bagatelle, we have a mixture of various consumer goods which are covered by the general product safety regs. So we are talking about toys, we're talking about childcare articles, but there are also certain consumer goods which sometimes are never designed to be related to children's products, but we have to control because there may be a threat or a hazard for that. So there's quite a mixture there that we do the hazard assessment process for them. So I'll go through my presentation today, and first of all, just talking about scope and definitions within a draft standards. So in the past, my experience is that certain harder product issues, such as novel products, have been excluded from draft standards, from the scope and from the definition. My thoughts are that we have to be aware of for certain products. We cannot, at the time of drafting the standard, be aware of all the childcare or toy products that may be available on the market, because this is a type of market that is super adaptable. We're constantly having new types of product appearing on the market all the time. So we are constantly trying to keep up with developments in technology for that. So my message here is, if there are harder products that you think, well, maybe we cannot include in the scope of this product, if we can, we will try to include all possibilities, and in this way, in some way, we have control on the undesirable or newly developed product types, which we perhaps cannot foresee, but they fall within the definitions of the legislation, and they fall within the definitions of the standardization requests. The control of such products should be via performance requirements and not by exclusion in the scope or definition. We rely on you as an expert with regards to what is the state of the art on the appropriate level of safety and performance testing. You are the experts within the technical committees. You know what toys are coming on the market. You know what childcare products are being developed on the market. So we do rely in the drafting process on your particular expertise. Finally, similarly, do not include any requirements, normally prohibitive requirements, in the definitions of the product in order to simplify the drafting. So what we're saying is, try to bite the bullet and say, yes, okay, it is possible in the future that there may be this product. If it fits within the standardization request, then try to include it. Okay, all the test requirements may not be applicable to it, but at least we have that definition of that particular product in that scope, and then within the definition process as well. A similar problem in relation to scope and definitions is by defining the scope of the standard by the product, and we need to define the scope by the product and product type themselves, and not by the activities of the technical committee, because otherwise this would not provide legal clarity. So in the past, we've had a technical committee define the scope according to the activities of the technical committee, but the scope has to be defined by the standardization request, and as required for that. To define by the jurisdiction of a technical committee links the scope to the unrelated organizational structure of the TC of the ESO, and not to the present or future legislation for that. So We don't get that very often, but it's very important to remember that the scope and definitions have to fall within the legal standardization requests. As mentioned previously, one of the higher failure rates is unsuitable reproduction of legal requirements, and this is something that is very important. And my work, again, is also checked by the quality review team, and this is one of the very important things that they do mention. Please do not copy and paste legal requirements without certain added value. So the default position is we do not include legal requirements within the normative parts of the draft standard. But there are some specific legal requirements that I will talk about now. So we have the legislation, we have the legal requirements, they stand alone, they are decided. Often general product safety regulations, they cover everything, so they cannot be too specific. Toy safety directive and the new toy safety regulation, it is a bit more what we call granular. And when I talk about the word granular, I'll use the word granular in later on as well. We have this concept of granularity. It means specificity. How exact, how clear can you be in relation to a particular point? So when I talk about granularity, this is very important. So we're talking about, instead of saying Article 2, we will say Article 2.1, paragraph C or Part C. If we're talking about clauses, we're not talking about Clause 8. We're talking about as finer, as clear as you can be. So we're talking about point 8.2 or point 8.2a. And this is to find, so we're not vague, we are very, very clear, because the standards, the supporting standards are the tool, they are the real world tool that we can use, that manufacturers, importers, and market surveillance authorities can use in the real world to define whether or not a product is compliant or not, whether a product is safe or not. So we have the legal requirements, and then we have the supporting standards. So please do not include the legal requirements unless you have a good reason to within the supporting standards. So yeah, so as I mentioned, how do we say, how do we do it? If we talk about toys, toys are like other product sector areas. They have essential safety requirements supported by more specific standardization requests. But in relation to toys in particular, there are certain specifics that are controlled, and one of which is chemical limits. Chemical limits in the form of chemical migration, chemical limits in the form of volatile emissions, chemical content levels, that type of thing. So here the legislation is specific and takes precedence. The minor standard is the standardization. The standards provide a preferred method of testing. So the standards themselves, the supporting standards, do not detail themselves the permitted levels. They reproduce what is present of the time of drafting the standard, those permitted levels in the legislation. The purpose of the supporting standards, particularly my experience in relation to toys, is to provide preferred methods. So for an example, if we're talking about the migration of heavy metals, lead and cadmium, research has shown that the higher risk is through the ingestion of metal and metalloid elements through the digestive tract. So it has agreed with the technical committee 40 and 71 that we will reproduce the digestive process. So that is a preferred method of testing for that. So the legislation sets the levels, and the supporting standards produces a preferred method of testing. The preferred method of testing often is as followed around robin testing. What is the method? What is reproducibility? What is the accuracy of the testing? So the standard supports the legislation which is there at the time of the drafting of the standard. Since 13th of December 2024, we now have the General Product Safety Regulation 2023-988, which covers items at the point of sale. I'm still talking about the unsuitable reproduction of legal requirements. So we've talked about chemicals. We're very specific and do not reproduce them in the standards. But since December 2024, how can I say it? It's not just the control of a product and the marking of the product, but there are specific legal controls on of the how we describe the product at the point of sale. So, in my view, it's quite a big jump. So, and I have seen some standards how to reproduce what are the requirements at the point of sale. And when I'm talking about the point of sale, we have I'm talking in particular distance sales. So distance sales and most particular online market sales, because let's face it, a lot of these types of products are sold online. And as safety is critical, part of the process is not just the safety of the design of the product, but does a consumer choose the correct product? Because a consumer cannot handle these products. They cannot talk to the sales rep easily about it. It's not like the old bricks and mortar shops. So the point of sale is now becoming more and more critical in relation to the information supplied for it. Is the product for the correct age group? Is the product correct for the correct weight of the child? The product may not be bought by the parents or the carers, may be bought by a relative. So they need certain critical information at this particular point of sale, particularly online distance sales for that. So I've seen in some standards quite with good intention certain information should be reproduced at the point of sale, but since December 24, the General Product Safety Regulations contain certain detailed information which should be provided, and these are legal requirements, and the legal requirements are very much dependent on the category of the economic operator. So we have certain different definitions, such as manufacturer, such as importer, such as fulfillment service provider, such as responsible person. So if my argument is that you should not be reproducing these legal requirements, because you could provide the incorrect information, because the obligations on describing the information that is required at the point of sale, the safety information that is required at the point of sale, is very much dependent on the category of the economic operator at the point of sale. So is the economic operator a fulfillment service provider? Is it a manufacturer within the EU, or is it a manufacturer in a third country? Is a responsible person? So these are very much described within the General Product Safety Regulation 2023. And quite recently, we've now had guidelines on the application of the General Product Safety Regulation as well, which has been actually produced this month as well, which we could provide more information for you. And at the bottom of the screen, indeed, you can see the notice, C 2025 7699. So these guidelines, if you're involved in the drafting of standards under General Product Safety Regulations, not just childcare articles, but any consumer products, I would very much that you read this particular, because this has particular reference to distance sales for that. I hope that makes sense for that. Okay. Yeah. So I've talked quite quickly about various economic actors who have certain obligations providing specific information on distance sales. And the most important things are, well, who are these economic actors? Are they in the EU? Are they outside the EU? Where is their place of business? Do they have an established place of business? And do they have an established contact point in relation to consumer complaints or safety issues? So my suggestion is in relation to this information, they are taken out of the standard, but there's an informative reference within the standard to the provision of the requirements for the legislation. So that is the relation, that is information in relation to the economic actors and the manufacturer, the importer, what have you. But it, in relation to distance online sales, there is certain information that is required at the point of sale, and you, as the technical experts for whatever product that you're involved with, will have decided that certain information should be provided at that point of sale. So in this case, you would not be reproduction of legal requirements. You are, in fact, adding value to those legal requirements. So, for example, the General Product Safety Regulation will say certain information should be displayed at the point of sale to assist the safety of the product, the use of the product, and the correct selection of the product. So I have two examples here. One is for high chairs standard 14988. And this is specific information which says this product is intended for children able to sit up unaided, so the child can sit up, and up to the maximum age of 3 years of age, or a maximum weight of 15 kilograms. So this is specific information which is not detailed in the legislation itself. It's not detailed specifically in the standardization request, but it's something, it is added value. So you are improving the specificity, you're improving the granularity of it. So in that case, you're adding value. And in this case, there's no problem with that again. Have a similar one for infant swings, 16232, which goes the other way. Do not use this product once your child can sit up unaided or weighs more than 9 kilograms. This is information that is provided online. So because we know once a product is bought, a carer or a parent may say, well, I've got the product now, I will use it. We know what people like. We know what humans like. If the product's there, maybe it will be used. But this is specific information that should only be provided at point of sale. So this is very helpful. This is something provided you within your TCs. This is critical information that should be used at the point of sale. So what I'm saying is this type of information does not unsuitably reproduce legal requirements for that. Okay. As mentioned previously, one of the failures is the fact that not all relevant risks have been considered by the TC. And we rely on you as TC expert participants to identify all relevant risks related to the toy or the consumer product, specifically with regard to standardization requests. So there are certain hazards that have been problematic in the past, but we encourage you to consider all relevant risks. We know there are constantly innovative products. There are new risks that we never thought about, which have occurred, but we counsel you to consider all relevant risks. If you don't do that, then it will not be permitted through the HAS process. In relation to general product safety regulations, the implementing decision 2023-1338, as mentioned, which relates to certain requirements for certain children's products, does detail the various hazards very helpfully in relation to what that includes. Flammability, includes mechanical hazards, and it is detailed logically through those to consider for that. So you would look at something like that, and you would look at any specific standardization requests. So if there are specific hazards, they all have to be considered for that. So for consumer products, we also have to bear in mind that we are looking at risk to the carer or the adult user. They have to be identified and managed because it's not just a child using a foldable pushchair. It is also the carer as well. So it may be the child is sitting in a product and it is safe in the product. There's no sharp edges and no sharp points for that. But the carer, when they are opening the pushchair, for example, there are mechanical scissor hazards associated with the folding, which may impact on the safety of the carer as well. So we're looking at the whole safety of the product, the holistic view of the product. Is a product not just safe for the user, the vulnerable user, which is mainly a child or a small child, but also the adult user as well. We have to look at the safety in the whole round. We're also concerned that all relevant risks should be based on the lifetime use of the product. So there we'd have to consider such things as endurance testing and the premature aging considered for high-risk mechanisms and parts. So we'd have to look at that as well. And I have seen some very good tests for it, durability testing, cycles for testing, those types of things. So very much please do consider those. Continuing all relevant risks, we are concerned with the foreseeable use of the product, including foreseeable misuse, because children are very active individuals. They are very creative. They like to explore the world. They will not sit quietly. They will, if there's a weakness in the product, they will find a weakness. If there's an unsafe part of the product, they will probably find that product as well. So when we're talking about foreseeable use, we're talking about foreseeable misuse. It could be a brother, a sister, a sibling is pushing a small child around. There could be an issue in relation to safety for that. So please consider foreseeable misuse of the product as well for that. So there has to be evidence that all relevant risks were covered for it to satisfy the HASS process, and the Annex Z should clearly specify the relevant risks that it does not cover for that. Moving on to test requirements, good practice. These are just some suggestions that will help the satisfaction through the HASS process for it. Clearly indicate the order of testing. Certain tests will impact on the results of other test requirements. So please think that through. Perhaps at the start of the standard, have a general area of testing saying this is actually indicate within the standard, this is the order of testing, or have wording to the effect that unless indicated otherwise, the testing shall be performed in the order of the clauses. So there is clear certainty for that. The test house, when they're doing the testing, they know the follow of testing to follow for that. Also, please consider pre-test condition of the product to replicate the real world and the use of the product during its lifetime use. So we are trying to put down normative test requirements that replicate the real world. Okay, so we're talking about aging due to external factors, ultraviolet exposure, exposure to saliva, exposure to sweat, children sweat, children explore the world through mouthing, particularly younger children. They will put things in their mouth. Products will be used outside. The product may be stored outside. There may not be room in the house, so it may be stored outside. Please consider aging due to external factors. Please consider mechanical wear and tear folding, unfolding of products, that type of thing. Please consider cleaning damage, such as simple things such as compulsory safety warnings on a product. Certain warnings have to be on the product and not in associated documents because it is so important, and the certain information has to be on the product. So if it's that important to be placed on the product, then it's important enough to have durability of the marking on the product to withstand cleaning damage and destruction through cleaning. So we're talking about shrinkage or destruction of the safety warning. So please include something. If you are saying, well, this warning has to be on the product, then please include also within the requirements the resistance to expected cleaning for that product. So the product may in the future be used by other children, or it may be used even secondhand. If that's important, if that's an important message you want to get through to consumer, we'll make sure that message is resilient enough, it is durable enough to stay on the product. And then finally, please consider such things as corrosion damage as well. So that's good practice for test requirements. This is also a very interesting subject as well. My suggestion is, where possible, require a single sample to comply with all requirements. We are not talking about quality assurance of products. We are talking about the safety of each and every single product. So each and every single product that is placed on the single market has to be safe. We're not saying 1% or 10% or 3%, each and every one. So that is the high level that we're coming from, but the suggestion is that we require a single sample to comply with all requirements. We have to remember also that this is a very interesting point, is that market surveillance authorities do use your standards, the deliverables you use, and the harmonized European safety standards that you produce are not only used by manufacturers, not only used by importers, but they also used by regulatory authorities, market surveillance authorities, most often at point of entry into the EU. They have a certain limited amount of time. They have a certain limited ability to access products. So if we can say a single sample has to comply with all the requirements of that standard, that will be preferable. However, it is understand that sometimes we do require more than one sample, particularly where a particular test may unfairly impact on the compliance of a later test. So, for example, a mechanical test may corrupt the results of a chemical test requirements. Which is understandable. In that case, I would always say, well, in that case, we would use the wording may. Another sample may be used for the chemical testing if it impacts on another test for that, which makes sense for that. So what I'm trying to say is we were trying to limit the number of samples needed for testing on a cost basis, but also on an accessibility basis of that sample for that. So a single sample is preferable unless the testing impacts on the validity of other tests as well. Moving on, I'd like to talk about objectivity in the test requirements. Often I find technical committee experts discuss these matters very much, and they think what is written is what their thoughts are. But if another competent user reads the standard and he's not totally clear in relation to it, then it's not objective enough, basically. There has to be specific technical clear requirements in whether or not a product fails or not. This is a thing called objectivity, and I find it quite a lot. So the test requirement is there, but whether or not a product fails or not, it's not quite so clear. So very much be very, very clear how you define whether or not the product complies or fails or not. So at the end of the day, two different competent users should not reach different decisions on that. So try to be very objective in relation to the test requirements. And finally, in relation to good practice, be very consistent on which parts of the product shall meet the test requirements. Is it just parts accessible to the child, to the vulnerable user, or is it the whole product? So, for example, you would have a consumer product for a child. It could be anything, and the child is placed in the product. It could be something like a sleep bag, or it could be a carrier cot, or it could be a pushchair. And generally, some technical committees use a device. They have constructed a device for accessibility of the child. And if this device can access any areas of this particular product, then they will call it a safety zone or some other description for that. Within that safety zone, there is particular requirements for that. Other technical committees will use this on the basis of measurements. So they will say the back of this product within a certain area is not within the safety zone and does not have to comply. But you are the experts, so you have to decide, be very clear and consistent as to which product should meet certain test requirements. How do you determine this accessibility, and is it consistent as well? So sometimes certain requirements will say if the child can access it, these are requirements, but in relation to other requirements, they are silent. We don't know if the child can access it or not. So be very consistent. What is the accessibility require? Are there specific accessibility requirements? Does it just apply to the toy? Does it apply to the user of the product, the adult, the carer as well of that? Please be very clear. Well, how do we define the safety requirements in relation to accessibility? So I'd just like to talk about table ZA, which has been a source of failure as detailed previously. It is a link between the specific legislative requirements and how the harmonized standards addresses those requirements. This is very, very important. We need the clarity for it because it's this super link between the legislation and the supporting harmonized standards as well. The table ZA, the annex, and in particular, the table ZA1 must be sufficiently detailed in describing this link with no ambiguity or need for interpretation. We need this clarity. We need this granularity. If we don't have it, then it will not satisfy the requirements of the HAS assessment. The table must be granular enough, and I've spoken previously about this granularity concept. It must be granular enough to support the risk assessment and the risk mitigation, the risk control in a precise manner. So the table will say, this is a risk and this is a control for it. So we know the link there. We can see it in the table, and this is very super important. Here we have an example from a table ZA, ZA1. Now, I would say clearly indicate the part of the legal requirement referred to in column 1. So in column 1, we have the legal requirements. In column 2, we have the clauses of the supporting standard. So in the past here, we can see a shorthand which relates to a certain part of the legislation, but this will be incorrect. Please describe fully and clearly which article or which annex or which appendix or which part of legislation you are talking about in column 1. So here we have an example. We have article XX.1 as small as you can, or part so-and-so of annex X clearly, or 0.2 or 0.3 of X-term. So please describe as granular as you can the part of the legislation you're talking about here. And here we can see, this would probably be for toys, we have Annex 2.3.1. Here it's clearly describing the parts of the legislation for that. So please put in the annex or the article in front of the figures. Don't just have the figures, but have the parts in the article. So there's no confusion at all for that. So we have this clear link in relation to the legislation and the supporting standards. Similarly, column 2 of ZA1 should describe it with as much granularity as possible, the clauses or subclauses that support the legislation. And here we see, in particular, we have the annexes, Annex 2.1.3 particular, Annex 2.1.2 particular, and here we see the more granularity. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes we see here, for example, for Article 11, which is general, we have Clause 6. If Clause 6 is the smallest level of granularity that you can attain, then that's fine. But here we see a particular requirement in relation to this Toy Standards Directive. It's very particular in what it requires. In this case, you have this more granularity, 5.1, 5.3, 5.6, as fine as you can, that relates to that. So we can clearly indicate what does cover it and what does not. Because if we don't do this at this point in the HAS process, there may be future problems once this once this standard is used in the real world, because these products are very much used, and people very much depend on the clarity and the clearness of these standards that are used. Another point is, do not include test methods in the table ZA, and unless it's specifically mentioned in the legislation, and I'm not aware of any such test requirements so far. So do not include test methods. And an example here we've found here is an example. Clause 8, we have a Clause 8 which includes both the requirements and the test method. So in that standard, this is a submission. So for example, the Clause 8 says shall meet, the requirement of the standard is that it shall meet the requirement for sharp edges in the other clause, but that Clause 8 contains both the requirement and also the test method. This is not permitted because it has a test method in the clause and it's not granular enough. On the same, this is the same text, but if we go more into more specific, more granular aspects of it, the preference is Clause 8.1.1, which contains only the requirement. So we have Clause 8.1.1 states shall meet the test requirements of Clause 8.2. So within the table, you have Clause 8.1, which is just the requirement, and we are not including 8.2. So the granularity takes out the test requirements, but keeps it very, very specific as well. So we don't have the test methods, we just have the requirements. The test methods are outside the table ZA. And the quality review team are very keen on this, so please bear this in mind when drafting your standards. Okay, this is very interesting one as well. Please ensure within the table ZA1 that you have the correct definition and the correct part of the implementing decision, the standardization request, with regard to the normative requirements. This will assist legal clarity. And I've got an example here. It was mentioned previously by the Commission that we now have this decision 2023-1338, for certain children's products, etc. And this decision does detail certain hazards that have to be addressed in the supporting standards. And here we see thermal hazards. Now, this decision identifies what a thermal hazard is. So thermal hazards shall include, but are not limited to, hot and cold surfaces, ingestion of hot and cold liquids, scalding, overheating, hypothermia, becoming cold, hypothermia. So thermal hazards are things to do with things that are too hot or too cold, basically. Yeah, whatever it is, solid or in liquid form. That is what a thermal hazard is. That is something that is defined within the decision. But what I have found in several harmonized standards, maybe they've been cut and pasted between various technical committees, but they've confused thermal hazards with flammability hazards, which are completely separate form of hazard identified in decisions. So here there's an incorrect example. So they've used this within the normative requirement, Clause 7, they've talked about thermal hazards. They've also talked about it in the supporting annex as well, thermal hazards, but they're not talking about, as I mentioned, the thermal hazards in relation to too hot, too cold. They're actually talking about flammability hazards, which are a totally different thing as well. So they're talking about a surface flash test, or they're talking about the rate of flame creepage for that product. So they have included the thermal hazard incorrectly, flammability requirements within the requirements of thermal hazards. Yeah. So how can I say? It's not a competition where we are not trying to put in as many hazards identified in the implementation decision as possible. What we're trying to do is find the most appropriate hazard identified in the implementing decision. It could be a thermal hazard, a mechanical hazard, and identify that within the table for that. Okay, and be very exact, be very clear for that. Do not try to include as many hazards as possible. For example, from your point of view, saying, well, we've designed these tests, we've designed these requirements. How many? It's not a process of saying, well, how many of these parts of the implemented decision shall we include in the table ZA? You are trying to find the most appropriate one that fits it. So if it's a thermal hazard, a thermal hazard. If it's a flammability hazard, it's a flammability hazard. Link the two solidly together and be as precise and granular as possible for that. Have some objective thinking in relation to that. In this way, the process will work very well indeed. Okay. I'd just like to talk briefly about annex rationales. So we have these. Are we good for time? Yeah. The rationales are an explanation of the normative requirements, and they provide a background to the normative requirements, and they indicate the current practical state of the art with regard to the requirements and tests. They indicate the real-world practicalities and problems of setting such normative requirements. So the rationales are an explanation to a competent reader of the document. What are the problems in relation to testing? What have you found? What is the research? What is the supporting data for it? And they explain the reasons for the testing, because somebody who picks up your standards may not be an expert in this particular area, and will say, well, why have we used this particular test? And the supporting rationale will give some background. They will provide workings out of how we decided to have this particular test requirement, have this performance requirement for it. So this is why they are so useful. And we rely on you technical members to determine the agreed requirements for this. So be consistent with the rationales. And please, when I talk about consistency, please make sure that all the relevant provisions, so all the relevant normative provisions, all the parts of the standards that have normative requirements, product shall be this, they shall meet this, we are required to do this. Please have some, as far as possible, an explanative rationale for that, and do not just have it for certain ones, because I've seen quite often there are certain rationales for certain ones, but not for others. I do appreciate you are short on time, but it's very helpful, very useful, and very supportive to have an annex rationale for all those normative provisions for that. So please clearly indicate what is possible and what is not possible, because sometimes we live in the real world and it is just not possible to do certain things. But please explain this in the informative rationale for that as well. And finally, relation. Oh,
sorry, excuse me to interrupt you, Alexander. Could you please try to wrap up quite quickly, because
yes,
time is running and we won't have a lot of time for the Q&A. Thank you for, sorry for interrupting.
Yeah. My last point, Frederick, yes. My last point is informative notes and bibliography. So these are excluded from the assessment, but perhaps good practice. So if you do not include informative notes and bibliography, they will not be excluded from HASS assessment. But please consider the holistic view, because a competent user will pick up your document and they will want to know, well, okay, is there other legislation as well? Legislation, standards are standards. But if you can put in as much as possible that moment in time of drafting the standard, what are the associated, what is associated research, what is associated parallel legislation. Standards do not lead legislation, legislation leads, but it will provide indication to the competent user, I need to go and look at this, I need to do that, because they will be performing their pre-market conformity assessment, and it will just give them a more wider view. So that's my point on that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Alexander, for your presentation, your great presentation. So now let's go to the Q&A. And so, Alexander, it will be probably mostly for you. So if you click on the Q&A tab, you will see questions that are there. And so some questions have been answered already, but the ones that are open, I see 12 questions, and I think most of them are technical. So maybe, Alexander, you can pick them and answer them, like read the question and answer the question.
I cannot find them, Frederick.
At the top left, you see 3 dots where normally you have a counter. Like a counter, you see 12, a figure in a red bubble.
Might also be on the bottom. For me, it's on the bottom.
Okay.
There should be a Q&A button with a bubble that says 12 in red.
Yeah. Could you read the questions out?
Yes, okay. I will read the first one. It will be.
I am sorry.
So no worries. A question from Anthony Kiran. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. How should the DOC be completed, both for toys and general products, in the case where the manufacturer does not use harmonized reference standards or where they do not exist?
Oh yes, this is not really a question. The declaration of conformity, DOC. Yes, so this is not a question for drafting standards. So I can answer it if you want.
Okay, but if it's not related to drafting standards, maybe we can invite Anthony to
Annalisa.
Annalisa, yeah.
Yes, thank you. No, indeed, it is not really in relation to drafting standards, but I can quickly provide a reply. It is actually in the annex of the Toy Safety Directive. It's Annex 3 of the Toy Safety Directive regarding the declaration of conformity. And so you have point 6 and 7. So in the case where the manufacturer has applied the harmonized standards, then reference should be made to the harmonized standards or to the specifications in relation to which the conformity is declared. Otherwise, if this has not been the case, so in case there has been a third-party certification by the notified body, then there is the obligation is to indicate the notified body, name, number, the description of the intervention, and the certificate that has been issued. And this is in point 7 of Annex 3 of the Toy Safety Directive.
Thank you, Annalisa. Annalisa, while you have the floor, maybe you can address the question from Sue Bolton. I don't know if you see the Q&A, but there's a question saying,
yes.
Please. Yes. So the question reads, please confirm, is the new standardization request for childcare articles?
No, this is not for us because I'm in charge of toys. So this is for childcare articles. They're not covered by the Toy Safety Directive.
Okay, thank you. I see a question probably for Marie. Thank you for the introduction, Marie. I'm not sure if I heard correctly, but will there be some guidelines published soon for the GPSR? Thanks. Is Marie still with us? Okay, if Marie is not with us anymore, we will reply to this question later. I will go through the questions. I see a question from Mir. I will not pronounce the name because I will not be able to pronounce it, but if I understand correctly, GEST assessments will be for baby frames and others. Could someone address this question?
I don't know what the question means. I do not understand the question.
Maybe, Mir, if you could clarify your question, we will try to address it before the end.
Yeah.
So I will jump to the next one from Anthony Kirain.
Yes.
Again, is there a mechanism for HAS consultant to contribute to the standardization process, for example, for pointing out editorial errors, or must the comment assessment only be related to the compliance of the standard? So I will start by answering this one, but no, HAS consultants cannot contribute to the drafting of the standard. They can only intervene following an assessment performed, and so you can have a contact with HAS consultant when you receive an assessment report. And when you do receive an assessment report, we highly encourage you to engage with a HAS consultant, to request a meeting with a HAS consultant.
Yes, and I can add to that. We have been advised that it's not the HAS consultant's job to deal with editorial errors, but I will deal with editorial errors if they are impact significantly on the how do we say the clarity of the standards. So if it's something that's misspelled, misspelling or grammar, I will not deal with unless it impacts on the clarity and how the standard describes the requirements. Yeah, if that makes sense. Good question.
Another question from Anthony. Can you confirm how the scope of the standards versus the regulations actually works? For example, should toy product be addressed in a separate standard for toys, or is it possible to address toys in the same standard as general product standards? Is it possible to have a single standard referenced in OJO to support two different regulations? Anthony, yes, it is possible to have one standard supporting different legislations. And this is done through the Annex ZD, actually. It's through the table ZD.2, where you need to have, if your standards support two legislations, then you need to have two tables ZD.2. One, for example, for toy safety, and another one for GPSR. Alexander, if you want to add anything to my answer.
No, that's very clear, I think, Frederick. Yeah. Hmm.
I see a question from Sue Bolton, several questions actually from Sue Bolton. The first one is about M309, that is outdated, defined in the scope as clothing and footwear for children. There are two separate TCs and products are very different. How do we get the standardization request focused on either footwear or clothing? The products are completely different with different industries. Can Astrid or anyone else address this one? Or we can address it later as well, but if someone can take it live.
But yes, for general products, there's various TCs. So for toys, we just have two technical committees, but for general product safeties, we have different 3 or 4 or 5 different TCs at the moment.
Okay, maybe we will address this question more in detail later.
Yeah.
Next question from Sue. Does it remain acceptable for certain products to carry instructions for use and/or warnings to mitigate hazards? These to be available at point of sale, after sale, and possibly on the article. These to be defined in the standard.
Yes. Wow. This is for the technical committee to decide. So, for example, certain products for a young child be placed in, they are not there to hold the child while the carer goes somewhere else. The child must always be in the view of the carer. So there are warnings, and the warnings are not just on the packaging, but the warnings on the product itself, that the child must always be in view for that, particularly for younger children, because, for example, high chairs, find a way, they will slip down and fall and maybe hang themselves. So certain information has to be there. But the decision has to be made by the technical committee, and then we will review it. So, for example, certain hazards you will have to be addressed by design, by performance analysis. So, at the end of the day, some risks are so high that you cannot have warnings for it. You have to be addressed by performance requirements within that. So it is for the technical committee, based on the knowledge and the data, to make that decision. But we will review that risk analysis and risk control through the HAS process as well. But it is for you to start that initial examination of the risks.
So next question from Sue. In the real world, we have new exposures arriving all the time.
Yeah.
We have got to go-kart tracks, aka sparks water shoots. Some are well established. Sorry. Others are one-season summer pop-ups. Who is responsible for the safety of the child? The service provider or the garment makers? In all other scenarios, the garment is safe. Well, maybe
Okay.
I don't know if you can address it, Alexander. Otherwise, we will write the answer.
Well, I can, but it's a question for DJ Just, really. But my understanding is general product safety regulations are not just for products that are sold, but they are for products that are used by a consumer. So, for example, if a consumer uses it in the course of a service, it could be so the consumer just uses that product in a hotel or in an environment, for example, I'm trying to think, a fairground, maybe something like that. So in the course of a service, general product safety regulations will apply for consumer goods. So, but the product has to be safe and the use of the product has to be safe as well. So if the product is intrinsically unsafe, if it is unsafe by design, then it is a problem for the standards committee. If it's unsafe because the way it's being used by the service provider, then it is a problem for the service provider. But the technical committee has to foresee the use of that product. So the products I deal with are not just for children, but they are, for example, gymnasium fitness equipment, strength equipment, static bicycles. They are divided into categories according to where they're used in a health and fitness or in a domestic environment. So these problems have to be foreseen by the technical committees, and sometimes they do this by dividing up that product. There are certain categories for use in health for fitness centers, and there's certain products for use in a domestic environment. So these have to be foreseen by the technical committee.
Okay, thank you, Alexander. Next question from Diane Greaves. It will not be easy to address, I think, this one. If a fatal incident occurs to under three-year-old child, I guess, because of a particular characteristic not covered by the standard requirements, in this case, the shape of a product, can this be treated as an isolated incident, or should changes to the standard be taken in spite of the fact that the incident was a one-off and there was no documented evidence of previous incidents or fatalities?
Yeah. This is a very good question. Fatalities bring to the service particular problems with the standard. And as I mentioned at the start of my presentation, when a standard is drafted, it's a particular moment in time, and toys and consumer products are a very, very dynamic market. They have a very low cost point. So we are constantly, and they're also produced by third countries, not by countries within the EU. So we're having a constant introduction, a constant importation of new high-tech products. Manufacturers are competing against themselves for new ideas. And sometimes in this rush to present products to market, the proper conformity assessment process is not followed. But occasionally we do get unfortunate instances where we have fatalities, but also near misses as well. So there's not a fatality, but it is reported. But there are mechanisms for reporting such incidents through European standards organizations and also the market surveillance authorities reporting to the national market surveillance authorities, who will then take the issue up as well for that. So it will be examined. So, but we need to act quickly in relation to it, because if we have a fatality or a near miss incident, why has this happened? Is it because the product's been on the market and we've only discovered it, or is it because it's a new product and other competitors are copying this unsafe product? We need to quickly and communicate with each other what is the reason for this particular problem.
Thank you, Alexander. I see Annalisa, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Frederick. I just wanted to complement the reply from Alexander, but just saying that this has to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. And first, there is need to see what happened, and then to see if there was a safety issue in the toy or if a particular categories of toy, and also to assess whether that particular risk is covered by requirement in the Toy Safety Directive, and if the standard which is supporting that requirement is not fully satisfying it. So in that case, there is a possibility to have a formal objection to the standard. This can be either initiated by the member state or by the Commission. And this could actually end up in a restriction of the standard, in the sense that the standard in question, if it does not fully satisfy the requirements of the Toy Safety Directive, then it could be, the reference of the standard could be published in the official journal with the restriction, indicating that that particular risk is not fully covered by the standard.
Thank you, Annalisa.
We had similar cases. Actually, we recently had an implementing decision adopted in September as the outcome of a formal objection submitted to standard EN 711 for a specific category of toys.
Thank you. Next question from Sue Bolton. So, if my product does not comply with the harmonized standard, can a safety assessment be applied to determine safety under GPSR? If so, who would carry out the safety assessments?
Yeah, this is not a question for standards developed for the HAS process.
Yeah,
this is a conformity assessment.
Exactly. I was about to say this is a conformity assessment, and it would be a third-party test house to take care of it. Yeah, indeed. So next one about so from Alan Ross about the table ZA. If table ZA provides granular link between the legislation and clauses in the standard which addresses the hazard, is it necessary for the clause of the standard to directly mirror the hazard in the legislation? For example, if the legislation mentions suffocation, then all different subclauses on suffocation are part of same clause, or can the standard be written in a more producer-friendly manner where all clauses relevant to specific components or feature are listed together?
I think we have to be very conscious of the legal definitions as well. So, for example, the implementing decision on childcare articles has specific definitions of products and hazards. So, from a legal point of view, we have to be very consistent in adopting the same definitions and categories of hazards and products. That would be my initial view.
But I think here the question is more, can the standard be drafted in a user-friendly way without necessarily following the order of the clauses of the legislation? And I would say it's the case. So the standard could be drafted in a more user-friendly way if they respect the granularity and so on. And then they would list in the tables ZA.2 the clause of the standard that are linked to the essential health and safety requirements. The link could be made through the tables ZA.2. Is it correct? Okay, so in a very short explanation, Alan, yes, it's possible to write it in a more producer-friendly manner as long as you respect the granularity and as long as the link between the clause of the standard and the essential health and safety requirements of the legislations are met through the table ZA.2.
Yeah.
Thank you. Question from Anthony Kiran. How should TCs treat risks that are in scope of the general safety requirements of the Toy Safety Directive or GPSR, but are not specifically described in the standardization requests? Well, maybe this one we can address it later when we provide the Q&A to.
Yeah, I think a lot of hard work has been progressed on the Commission side, because in the past we have had mandates which were quite general, but now more and more we are trying to be very specific in relation to risks and hazards. Yeah, and there's a lot of brainstorming, and what about this, what about that, and we have gone through it. So we've tried to address all risks at the moment, but we can certainly come back. Yeah. Good question.
Well, before continuing with the Q&A, else, do you want to proceed with the feedback?
Yes, indeed. I would like to launch a feedback poll for all the attendees. It's just a short poll with 3 short questions asking your feedback on this webinar, and we use the replies to improve our webinars in the future. So if the attendees that are still online could please reply the questions, that will be very helpful. Thank you.
And so let's try to take a couple of questions before the end. And for the other questions that we would not have time to address, we will come back to you in a written form. We will reply to all the remaining questions, and we will come back to you in a written form. Alexander, if you see the Q&A, maybe you can take one.
Yes, certainly. If a standard has an omission in respect of a specific potential hazard, but there is no evidence or injury of a fatality, how can this be raised for a new standardization request? So the standard does not control a potential hazard, but to date there's no evidence of injury or fatality. So there is a perceived risk, but it's not have happened, but there is concern that it should be addressed in a new standard. That's my understanding from Alan Ross for that. So how can this be inputted into the standardization request procedure? That's the question. I don't know the answer to that. If anybody else does. Yeah.
Yeah, this can probably be answered by our colleague from the Commission.
Yeah. Okay. A question from Andrew Yates. Does the HAS process include an assessment of the benefits of the activity, which needs to be balanced against any inherent risks? For example, children climbing structures need to include sufficient challenge to provide development opportunities, which also present inherent risks. So Andrew is saying, well, what about the benefits? There is always risks there. So I assume what Andrew is saying is, well, by making things super safe, then there is no play value. And I think that's what he's saying. Yeah, but that is a good question. That is down to the technical committee. That is down to the participation in the technical committee. And perhaps if you want to be involved in the technical committee through your national mirror group to TC whatever, TC that, then maybe you could participate in it. But there are certain risks where we just have to control that particular hazard because the hazard is so high. But yes, I understand the question there. The balancing of play, exploration and play, balancing the safety of it. Yeah, there is that. That's a good question, but yeah, that is for the TCs to decide, basically. Yeah. Shall I keep going? Paul Salverde has said EN 71X standards sometimes have requirements that are not specific mentioned in the Trading Standards Directive, but are justified by the General Trading Standards Directive statement, toys should be safe, such as the pH value, the acid alkaline value of finger paint. How can we as suppliers avoid or influence this in the coming process of standards for the toy standards regulation? So how can suppliers avoid or influence requirements that are not specified in the Toy Safety Directive? How can suppliers be involved in this process? That's the question.
Yeah, I would say this is for our EC colleagues probably to address this question, if there's a way or not. because this is about the regulation. So yeah, I would invite our EC colleagues to address with this question. I will circulate anyway the Q&A to all the presenters, and then I will invite EC to address this one. Maybe we have still, I know it's 12, but let's say if last question, and then
we have a question from Gerardo Ferrero regarding safety warnings and instructions to be shown for every product at distance online sales according to the general product safety regulations. Do you consider that CE marking is needed as well? I mean, do you consider CE marking could be considered as a safety related info relevant to consumers? Well, Gerardo, CE marking is not a safety mark. It is a statement by the manufacturer, the importer, by the relevant economic operator that that particular product complies with the legislation. So it could be more than one piece of legislation. It could be several pieces of legislation. But the CE marking is an indication that my product meets all those requirements. I have done the conformity assessment for it. I have the technical documents before I place. Everything is in place before I place it on the market, and I'm putting the CE marking on there as well. Yes, we tell consumers to look for it, but essentially the CE marking is a statement by the manufacturer, by the producer, that it meets the regulations and hopefully the supporting standards as well. But you need to look at the specific standards that are currently being drafted in relation to each and every product, what is being put online. But I would recommend certainly look at the sector-specific legislation. So for toys, look at the toy safety regulation that will be coming on stream later this year, and also look at the general product safety regulations and the new guidance documents that came out, which is very, very helpful and had some certain nuances, some certain exploration as what should be done on online sales, so that these distant sales warnings are clearly described.
Okay, thanks a lot, Alexander. So it's 12 past. We are 2 minutes over time. I think we can close it here. I want to thank all of you. Thank you for the attendees. Thank you for joining us this morning for this webinar. Thank you to the European Commission for the support, to Annalisa and Marie. Thank you, Emilia and Dan from UI, and of course, Alexander. Thank you very much for your help this morning and your contribution. So we will share the slides, the training material, and the video. The recording will be shared, and as well, we will address your questions in a written way, and we will share the answers to everyone. Thanks again a lot, everyone, for your attention and your attendance this morning. I wish you a very nice day, and see you soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.